Hi everyone. In the previous videos, we have implemented register and login functionality to our application. But what we didn't do is we didn't write any test cases and we didn't adjust the existing one. So I'm pretty sure that if we were to run the test script right now, some of the test cases would fail, or even if they would succeed, this just means that they currently are not sufficient enough to properly check if the functionality works or not. So for example, all the test cases where we go to our to-dos routes, these would no longer work, but for some of them, we only check for a redirection. And therefore, this would be redirected, but not to the correct place. Because, for example, a post request that creates the to-dos now would not be redirected to a to-dos route anymore, but would be redirected to /user/login route. Therefore, in this video, what we will do is number one, we will create additional test cases to check the whole user's login and authentication. And then two, we'll adjust the existing test cases so they actually check what they should be checking. Okay, this is a lot of work, so let's get started. First thing we want to do is we want to go to our test and routes folder, and here we want to create a new file. Let's call it users.js because this is how our routes folder is, or routes file it's called. So here, what we want to do is we want to require chai. So once again, are going to require chai. Once again, we'll be using chai, and from chai, we'll be using expect to make our assertions. Chai. And then we also want to use chai HTTP from chai HTTP. And what we will also need is our app. So the same, require the same way we did last time. So app/app. And then we want to have, let's divide this, constant client require. We want to have /app/db. Okay, and then we want our chai to use the chai HTTP module. Okay, and we will definitely need a testing user. Therefore, let's create testing user. Use testing user, we'll have our username of a testing user. Maybe let's not add a space here. And we need a comma, and we'll have a password of a testing password. And we'll have repeat _ password. It's very important to make it an underscore because this is the name of our file, of our field on the HTML form. And let's make it the same exact password. Oops, Control D, Control C, Control D, Control Pow. Okay. So now let's begin. What we want to do is we want to describe, and here we'll say testing user routes, and we create a function that will be called. So first off, let's create a function that will just get register route. Route. So this will just check if we go to /user/register if we get the correct file. So let's say correct return code, and let's say here done. And here what we do is we use once again chai requests, then put an app here .get /user/register and .end. We create a function that takes an error and the response, and I begin the error parameter with an underscore so that the Visual Studio Code knows that I will not use this. So this will not make it like a little bit faded, so that it's not used. And then we want just expect the response object to have a status of 200, and it's done. Okay, that's the first test case. Then let's go into something a little bit more complicated. Let's post the register. So let's test the post route on the register part. Okay, so here we once again want to make a function, And here I will very shortly define the function, which we'll call it make register. Oops, I can't spell. Register call that will take a send data and will take end function. Because we'll be making this call repeatedly and we'll be checking for the result errors. So here we want to say try request app, and this time it will be a post to user/register that will be of a type. So it will send the data as form data, will send the data that will input as a parameter, will not be redirected, because if we didn't set this, if we checked for some parameters of a request, this would just check for the last one and not for the first one that we want to check. And then once again, we won't have an end with an error and response. And we want to execute the end function here, where we also put the error and response. Okay, so this is like a helper function for us. And we define this helper function so that we are, for example, able now to define, or not, now we will not use it, but we will define a before hook. In the before hook, asynchronously, we will await client.query. And what we will query for is we'll just clean up. So we'll make sure that we don't have any testing users from, for example, failed test cases from the last run. So we'll do it from users, where username equals $1, and the $1 it will be testing user dot username. Okay, so this is our before hook. Let's continue. So after we ensure that we don't have any leftover testing users, let's go to IT and let's create what we want to test now is we want to check that a created user is equal to the testing user. Or no, wait, before we do that, we need to, of course, test for a correct redirection. Redirection on user creation. So here we want to pass a done. And here we want to make a register call. And we want to make a register call with send data as testing user. And then we pass in a function. I messed up here. And here we want to pass in a function that will take the underscore error and then response objects. And what it will do is we will expect response dot redirect to equal true. And we want to expect the response dot header dot location to equal slash user slash login. And this is the point that the test case is done. Okay, let's currently check if this works. So let's say npm run test. Okay, we have some errors. Correct redirection user execution. This doesn't really work for us. B is because we had a false instead of a true. And I think what you should make sure is that here we had a small syntax error before, therefore you have to add this parenthesis here. Okay, so this is it. Let's currently try to investigate the error. So now what I did is I just printed, if you take a look here, I just printed our response object. And if we take a look here, what are we getting? Especially in the text file, here we can see that we get the error message that the passwords must be equal. And that's just, that's just because here there is a small issue with spelling repeat. Okay, I hope that's correct. Let's run it once again. Let's see what happens. Okay, we need to be in our app folder, cd app. Let's go back to our previous, maybe here. Let's stop this run and let's create it. let's run it once again. And currently, okay, you still have a lot of, because you still have this here. Let's currently, once again, stop it. Let's run this part again. And currently our user registration routes are okay. That's good. Okay, let's continue. So we have checked for a correct redirection. Let's now check for that if the created user is equal to the testing user. Okay, and here we want to have it asynchronous. We want to have this part be equal to, and now we'll have a response here, and the response will be, we'll await for the promise to be resolved, and the promise will be a query to the database. We'll select the username, or maybe we just need password, to be honest, from users, where username equals $1. And here we'll use the testing user dot username. Okay, and we'll generate our hashed password, because once again we want to hash our password. Or here we will extract the hash passwords from the database, but underneath we'll expect, and now we'll await bcrypt.compare and make sure that it is imported. I'll check that in a second. Testing user.password, sorry, this is our password that we have in the testing user, and here we will compare against the hash password, and we want this to be equal to true. Okay, and now the bcrypt should be, yes, exactly, should be imported, and we run the test once again, and here we can see that indeed this test case was also successful. Okay, that's good. Let's move on. So now we created this make register call helper function. And we created this because now we'll repeatedly use this function to make calls to the register route to check for different error messages. So here we'll say correct error message on too short password. We'll say that it is indeed done. And what we'll do is we'll make a register call. Once again, we'll call this function. Let's maybe copy this part right here. But now, instead of a testing user, we'll have some different data here. So username, we can use the testing user.username. This is fine. But for a password, we'll have something that's way too short. And for the repeat password, we'll once again use something that's way too short. And now we want our redirect to be false, because we don't want to be redirected. If you remember, if we fail a form validation, we are left on the /user/register route. However, now what we want to have is we want to expect the response.text. So this is the text is what we've seen, right? So this is the HTML. So we want it to include the error message that we defined, and the error message is password must be at least that the generic part of the message. And we want this to be equal to true. So this includes function returns true or either true or false. True if it's found, false if it's not. Okay, let's run the test case. And here we can see that it was also successful. Okay, that's good. Therefore, let's continue. I will copy this test case. I will paste it right here. And now we'll check on correct error message on different passwords. So once again, we have the correct username, but here we have a correct length password. Let's Ctrl-D, Ctrl-C. Let's move up here. And correct length, but however, different password. And the error is what we've already seen. Passwords must be equal. Okay, let's also run this part. And it's also good. Okay, I'll copy this once again. And we'll now test for correct error message on too short username. So here we can use once again the testing user dot repeat password, and here we can use once again a testing user dot password. However, here we'll use something that's way too short. Let's just say a single A, and now we want the error message to contain username must be at least. Okay, let's also run this part. That's good. Okay, and now we want to have an error that our user is already existing in the database. So what we will do is we'll take that, we'll essentially try to create our testing user once again. So here, instead of this object, we'll just pass in once again our testing user. We want our redirection to be false, and we want our error to say that a user with this username already exists. And it should exist because we have created it some test cases above. Looks like it does. Okay, that's very good. Okay, so now we have finished the post register. Now we can and get register. So now we can move to a post login. Or let's start with get login. That's slightly easier. So in the get login, what we want to do is we just want to test for the correct status code. So here we have done this type of test many times already. So here we say shine.request app.get and then /user/login. And on the end, we pass in _error response. And this should be, we want to expect the response to have a status of 200. And this is where it's done. Okay, let's, once again, we have added something. Let's run the tests. Test is successful. That's good. Let's move on. Because that's, of course, not everything we want to. That's actually in this section, that's everything. So we want to now move to our post login. This will be a little bit more complex. So first off, what we need to do now is, once again, I will make here a helper function that will be called a make login call that will also take send data and end function. So that's very similar to the one we did above. So let's in fact go up where we define this function, and let's copy the body of this function. Let's paste it right here because we just need to change this to be a login, and that's good to go. So we could make it generic, so like make a call and then here the post as a parameter, but this is not that important currently here. Okay, so we have the function, and what we want to do now is we want to have a test case, basically a correct login, right? And what is a correct login for us? So a correct login is we need to make a login call. We need to make a login call where we put the username of our testing user -username and a password of our testing user .password. And here we want to pass, obviously inside here, our error response. So this is the end function. And in the end function, we want to expect our response to be redirected. So response.redirect.to equal true. Here a dot, of course, instead of a slash. And we are going to expect our response.header.location to equal to this. Oops, here, slash to this. Okay, and this is the point where we want it to be done. Let's currently run the tests. And it looks like, okay, the post login. Here we have an error for the post login. Let's inspect the error. The reason is a typo once again. Here we should have a password with a double S. Let's make it run, and it's working correctly. Okay, fantastic. Let's move on. So we have the correct login. Now let's check the incorrect password. I will just copy the test case. What we'll do is we'll still use the username, but we'll just put here incorrect password. And we want our response.redirect to be equal to false. And we want our error message to be something like user with this username does not exist, or the password is incorrect. And we want this here to be response.text, and we want it to be, I messed up this up a little bit, but dot includes. And now that's dot includes, and we want to say maybe another line to equal true. We want this text to be there. Okay, let's now run the test case. Let's see if I got it right. And it looks like it works. However, let's make a slight change to the title of the test case. Incorrect password. Okay, and then we want to make a test case if a user does not exist. So, user does not exist. Once again, we make a login call. This time we can use here a user that does not exist, and we actually want this the rest of the things to be exactly the same. Okay, and I think here we have a small issue because we have, I see two test cases with the same name, and here we are testing for user with this username already exists. Or let's maybe say, just to be correct, error message for a user that already exists. Okay, that's good. And here user does not exist. And that's fine. So currently these are all the test cases we'll create for our users routes. Okay, now we'll move into our session test cases. And here we'll have quite many or some changes to do. So now we have quite some work to do. Let's go over here and we'll create a whole new session. We'll describe, we'll be testing session authentication. And now here we'll have quite some pre-work to do, because what we need to do first is we need to create a new user and we need to log in with the user. So let's create a before hook, just so that it's organized nicely. And in the before hook, we will have an asynchronous function. And here we'll have some work with promises to do. If you don't know what promises are in JavaScript, I will make a video about asynchronous code in JavaScript. This will include promises. So currently, if you don't know it, you can just follow it. There will be a video coming on, or you can use just one of the many videos that are already available about this topic. I will just try to make mine a little bit better than what's already existing. But for this, the understanding that you will get from the other materials already available is completely fine. So here we'll make first off client.query. We will remove any users that already could be existing. So we'll delete from users where username equals $1. And here, oops, it's an array, testing not session, but testing user. And I guess we don't have the testing user up here. No, we don't. Okay, so let's copy this testing user because we will need it a lot, because we need to log in properly here. Okay, now we also have the testing user here. So testing user.username. So this is just to make a cleanup. Okay, so this is the first step of our before hook. Then what we want to do is we want to await a new promise, and we actually need to make it into a promise just to use how Mocha, so the newest versions of Mocha work. So what we will do is, if this function that we are creating right here, so the before hook, will return us a promise, this will automatically wait for it to be resolved. So this is pretty nice. However, we have to make these child requests into promises, and you do that very simple. So you basically make a promise, you pass in a resolve here, and resolve is basically a function that if you will call, this means that the code that's otherwise synchronous is resolved. And this is how you can also make it work with the callbacks, right? So here you say -user/register, We could also make it work with the done, I think, but let's maybe try something different this time. This will be of a type form, so we are doing a standard user registration here, right? Nothing fancy. We're just sending the, oops, not try this. We are just sending the testing user. And once it finishes, so here we create this function, we don't need the error or response objects, we just say resolve. Okay, so once it gets to here, once it ends, so once this is fulfilled, this promise will also be fulfilled. Okay, and then we need to return once again a new promise that, so we pass in a resolve here. And here we make a try request app dash post slash user slash login. We could also copy our or import our functions that we defined in the users test, but yeah, it doesn't really matter. We want the type to be form, and we want to send our test as username, our testing user.username, and as password our testing user dot testing user dot password, and we don't have a comma. Okay, and what we want to have is, we don't want to have redirects. This doesn't really matter that much, and we want to, or it actually matters. You'll see why in a second. Here we want to have error response, is because here we want to extract the session ID, because you could make, and we will make, however not now, the chai work so that it has, we can extract the cookies from one request and then we can attach these cookies to another request, and we will do that in a second once we will be getting into the how do we test the force and the enforced authentication. You'll see that. However, here what I like to do is I like to just do exactly that. I like to extract the cookie so that we can use it later. So how we extracted the cookie, you could have seen it. I think we extracted it here above, right? So we had the start index, and then we slice, and then we basically do it the same way as we did right here in some of the previous videos. So we say last session ID, and now I'll just say cookie.slice, and I will say 1450, and I've checked that before. So basically the cookie looks like you have a session ID, and then you have an equal sign, and then you have first, I think, 3 or 4 characters, which are not part of our UUID, and then it goes for 36 characters. So this is how we basically get just the ID without the hashes that are generated for the cookie. And here is where we resolve this promise. However, for our session ID to be available to other functions in the scope, we need to define it here. Last, oops, not cast, but last session ID. And it will be now available if we set it right here. Okay, that's good. So we have the before actions done. That's quite a bit of before hook. Let's see if we have got everything here correct, because I currently doubt that a little bit. Because here we have this function, and then we also need to move this a little bit, and this is why it's very important so that you keep your tabulations in line. And currently I think we are missing one set of closing parentheses. Okay, that's good. That works now. Okay, let's go to the actual testing cases. So what we want to check is, we want to check if the session for the user was authenticated. Okay, I want the check. So here we'll write asynchronous code. And what we'll do, we want to have a response where we await, we do a client.query. And what we want to query for is, we want to select a username, however, from sessions. But we don't have the username on the sessions. So what we need to do is, what you want to avoid in your applications, actually you want to make a join. So here we could discuss our data model, if we actually should not put our username on the sessions instead of a user ID. Maybe that would be a good idea. That's generally up to you. Even if it means repeating the username, to be honest. Currently this query would be much quicker on the one hand side because our sessions table is getting pretty big pretty quick. And this will just be more convenient. You would not have to make the join. You don't want to make the joins in the backends of your application. This usually takes some time to process once your data volumes are getting bigger. So here we'll make a join. We'll make a join on sessions.user_id. So, but because we'll make it a join because this is just tests. This can take a little longer, no problem. Where sessions.id equals $1. I need to make an alias, or we don't have to make an alias because username does not appear in the sessions table. However, just to make it obvious and transparent what's returned here. And we'll use our last session ID that we can access because we defined here as the global variable for this describe function. Okay, we have this. So now our session will be in the response object in the rows array, and will be the first one, hopefully the only one. And we will expect our session.username. I'm not checking if it's the only one because one, we are generating this with UUID, and second, we have primary key on this column, so that it better be unique. We'll say testing underscore user dot username. Okay, so basically what that means is we want this username for whom the session was authenticated to be equal to our testing user, because here we have logged in with the user. Okay, that's quite a bit of code, quite a bit of tests. Let's see if all of this work. And we can see that our login routes work. Okay, that's perfect. So what comes next is we have checked that our login works correct. And so, sorry, not that our login works correct. We have checked, because this we have checked in the routes. Here we have checked if our session was correctly authenticated. So we have checked what was changed in the database. And what we need to do now is we need to clean up. So we need to have an after hook. After hook will be an asynchronous. We'll take an asynchronous function as a callback. And this will await client.query once again. And we will query. So what we'll do is we'll delete from sessions where user ID in, and we'll select ID from users where username equals $1, and we'll pass in the testing user dash username. Okay, that's cool. And this is what we want to do, number one, and then await client. Let's return it. We want to return await client.query. Here we want to delete from users where username equals $1 once again, and once again this will be the testing user dot username. So here we could define some kind of foreign key relation, but as we didn't, we need to delete from two tables. Because if we had a foreign key that had a correct on delete behavior, we could just delete the user and then it would delete all the sessions for this user. However, we currently don't have that, therefore we have to work with what we have. And here we had one, I think, error here. Let's see. Testing user is not defined in the after hook. Okay. And fantastic. This is because we had an error here. Okay, and this did it show all our session? Yeah, it did show in our session notes. Okay. That's cool. Now it should work. And testing session authentication. Okay, here we still have an issue. Cookie.slide is not a function. Ah, yeah, that's very true that it's not a function. Cookie.slice. Let's just check once again. Now we can already see that the tests are starting to take a while, but currently this has worked. Okay, good. Now what we need to do is we need to move, or we want to move to the auth. So here we have the auth file, which checks if our session was authenticated or not. And let's currently write some tests for it. We want to create a new file, not here, in the tests folder. New file, let's call it auth.js. What we want to take is we want to take the whole part from here to the auth file, and let's delete a few things that we will not need. We'll not need the session, and that's mainly it. So for now, we'll do something, I think interesting for testing. We'll just define a few new routes. So here we have the app variable. We can as well define some more routes as you would normally, right? So just for testing, check authenticated, and here we will apply the check authenticated, and it has been imported. Thank you, Visual Studio Code. This will be a normal route that will take a request and response, and that will return us a response.json, just with a message that testing get route that does not require authentication. That does require, of course, that does require authentication. Okay, and then we want to create another route. This will be check not authenticated. Testing get route that does not allow authentication. Does not allow authentication. Okay, that's the step number 1. So first off, let's create a describe. So we want to be testing the authentication functions. And here we want to pass in a function as always. What we want to be doing here is describe. We want to be testing check authenticated. And this will take a function as always. Well, I messed up something here. This should be, okay, this is should be a closing tag right here, and we pass in a function right now. Okay, now what you not instance of, but just it, and we'll have correct redirection on enforced authentication. So basically, when we make a not authenticated call, we want our function to redirect us to a route, to a login route. So as this we already know, try.request.app, and then we want to get check. Let's maybe not type it because we'll make a type once again. Check authenticated, and then we don't want to see the results of the redirection, but of the main request. And on the end, we want to pass error response. We expect our response.redirect to equal true, and we expect our response.header.location. So this is where we were redirected to equal /user/login, and this is the point in time that we are done. Okay, let's test it. Okay, I already see 21 passing. This means that it was good, but let's maybe try to find it. Testing authentication functions, correct redaction and forced authentication. That's good. Okay, this works fine. Let's now test the not authenticated. This will be a little bit more tricky. Let's say testing check not authenticated. And here we once again pass in a function. And now what we need to do is There, if you remember here in the session, we created this whole section that actually allows us to get authenticated. So the before hook, let's currently copy the whole before hook to our auth folder. Now we have the before hook, that's good. And what we want to have here is we want to let cookie. Let's save it and let's copy this cookie. And now what we want to have is we want to have this cookie up here. But we want to have a whole cookie currently extracted. That's good. Okay. See where it ends. It ends right here. So now if we send an authenticated request, and I needed to save this cookie in order to make an authenticated request. And we now logged in with this user for this session. So this session should be authenticated. Therefore, if we currently have a route that is protected by the check not authenticated, we want to be redirected to to-dos. Therefore, correct redirection on an authenticated request. Okay, once again done. And we set it equal to child request app. And then we say .get. And we want to get this route up here, check not authenticated. And we want to set cookie to a value of cookie variable. And we don't want to see the result of the redirect. And we want to end with _error response. And we want to expect our response.redirect to equal true, and we want to expect the response.header.location to equal /todos, because we want to be redirected to the to-dos. And now we also had here an after hook. Let's also copy this after hook. Let's also paste it right here. You could think about if you don't want to just put this in some kind of a function. Therefore, it will be slightly easier to reuse. Okay, that's good. That's most of our test cases done, and that's an error. Why? Check not authenticated is not defined, and it is not because we did not import it. Oops, this is what I did here. Let's see, Control-V, check not authenticated. Okay, so now it runs. We see, okay, undefined for header cookie. Let's see what is not right here. Because here we have a const cookie. This is not right because then it defines it only for this scope. Okay, let's once again run it. And here we have /todos and it's been undefined. Okay, let's see why that's the case. Because here, so it seems like our request was not actually redirected because we expected a to-dos and we have got an undefined here. So the response.header.location. Okay, let's see why. And it's because here we did not pass our redirect route. We need to press it to-dos, and I now just noticed that I made some typos here in the routes that we are using. But well, that's life. Okay, let's end it. Let's test it. And currently, we once again have here an undefined, even though this is not the place where it should be. It should be here. Okay, let's run it again. And we see that this time it's okay, correct redirection authenticated request. This is still not correct. Let's see why. Okay, because we have a timeout. And we have a timeout because I forgot to call the done here. So third time lucky, maybe. Although your test should not pass just because you're lucky. And this time our tests have passed. But as you can see, here we are starting to get errors in our to-do routes. Therefore, we need to just go there and we need to fix the problems that we have, because most likely they are a result of us adding the register login functionality while our to-do test cases are not actually adjusted to it. Okay, so let's adjust these test cases a little bit. So what we need to do here is, let's grab the testing user. Let's put it also to to-dos. And here, what we need to do is, we once again need to create a authenticated session for us. Therefore, let's go to our auth folder. Let's take the before hook that we have here. Let's maybe take the body of this before hook. I believe that's up to here. Let's go to our to-dos. And because here we already have a before hook, so let's paste this before hook up here. Okay, let's currently do it like this. And here we are deleting the to-dos, we are deleting the testing username. That's all good, fine and dandy. Here we are authenticating our session, and let's just say here where we define the cookie, or up here, I like to have it defined up here, cookie, so that we'll have the cookie to use. Okay, and now when we want to test the get endpoint, we want to here that set cookie and to a value of cookie, and actually we don't want to be redirected, or we don't want to see the results of the redirection, and we want the status to be 200. That's correct, but then we want to expect the response.redirect to equal false, because we don't want to be redirected. We can remove it from here. Okay, that's cool. Let's now go to our next one. We can set once again the cookie to be a cookie. And now we want to test the to-do modifications, and I think we want to adjust slightly it here, because currently this is what I basically was telling about, right? That we are just testing for the redirection, and this request without the changes is getting redirected, but is getting redirected to our login route and not to our actual to-dos route. Therefore, here we need to test if we are getting redirected to a correct location. /to-dos. Okay, and so here testing to-do modification. This is good because here we are just checking in the database if something here was modified. This is why it was failing before, and we want to now do the same thing right here. Cookie and cookie right here. Okay, and once again we want to add this assertion. Okay, here we are just checking if the database was okay, and we want to test the delete endpoint. Therefore, here we also want to set cookie to be equal to cookie. And once again, we want to add this assertion right here. Okay, and here I'm just checking if everything was deleted properly. Therefore, let's run the test once again. Well, we have many issues here. Let's check why do we have them. Okay, cookie is not defined. Therefore, we probably defined the cookie. Exactly. This should be defined up here. So that, because currently only the before function would have an access to it, right? And we need all of the test cases to have an access, to have, error missing column. Okay, what I did not add, user ID of relation to-dos does not exist. And this is probably, okay, we also have here an error. And this is probably because we forgot at some point in time to adjust our table. So let's maybe create the table, the column now. What we need to do this, let's maybe open a new terminal. We need to go to, we need to say psql -u postgres, and we need to -f/scripts /tdl.sql. Oh, no, wait, sorry, we have it in users.sql. And we dropped the table, we created the table. Okay, let's check if we currently have it working. No, once again. Current user ID does not exist. Okay, because it's on the to-dos. So we should not recreate our users. We should recreate our ddl.sql. And here I think, yeah, exactly. We could be recreating how many times we want, but here we do not have this column physically. Therefore, we need to add it. Okay. Now we recreated it. Let's go back here. Let's stop it. Let's run the test once again. This is why it's good to have tests. And we see 26 passing. Let's run it once again just to see if that's not just some kind of mistake from our side, and we have it passing. However, I sometimes saw that here we basically have a test case which is based on the valid 2 seconds. And on this being slightly longer than this one, I will just set it to 1.7 now. So just so that it has a little bit more time. Just so that it has a little bit more time here. So this will be 1.7, let's say, and this will be 1.2. Okay, let's run it once again. And once again, I expect everything to be fine. Okay, that's very well. So we have successfully implemented the tests for application. So currently, if you want to implement any changes to the existing logic, you can just rerun the tests just to make sure that you have not messed something up with the existing functionality. For example, I don't know, I could think about that we want to just implement this remember me button, right? That you can click remember me, and then instead of the defined 10 minutes, where the application remembers the user, it will just remember it for like, I don't know, 30 days or something like this. This is very common on websites. This might be a homework or something we could do in the next videos. If you want, just let me know in the comments, and we'll get to it in some later videos from scratch, as usually, as always. And as always, there are easier ways to do this. You can use the Passport package. This will help you. But for now, thank you all for watching. And I will see you in the next video. In the next video, I believe we'll go over something a little bit more technical and networking oriented. We'll go over HTTPS setup. So see you in the next video.